Welcome to This Explainer. When most people hear the name Machiavelli or think about his famous work, The Prince, they usually picture dusty old history, right? Or maybe abstract political scheming. But today, we're going to look at chapter 26, the very last chapter of the book, in a completely different light. This wasn't just some academic exercise. Originally, chapter 26 was a desperate, real-world plea to the powerful Medici family during a time of absolute chaos in Italy. So we aren't going to read this like a textbook. We're going to look at it as an actionable, high-stakes blueprint for turning total systemic collapse into a massive structural opportunity. So think about this for a second. What if systemic collapse is actually a rare opportunity? Usually when a system breaks down, whether we're talking about a government, a massive market, or a sprawling corporate structure, we tend to assume that the collapse is purely destructive. Think of the 2008 financial crisis or the sudden fall of a historic empire. The immediate reaction is panic over what's being lost. But as the source material reveals, a breakdown is actually a structural opportunity window. When things fall apart, all those entrenched old rules completely disappear, and that creates a very brief opening for those who know exactly what to look for.
Section 1. Opportunity hidden in collapse.
Okay, let's dive right into this. We are transitioning out of abstract political theory and straight into the actual execution and mobilization model found in the text. To really grasp this, we have to look at the core mechanism directly from the source, which is defined as a compression point. Machiavelli describes this as a state of extreme system disorder. Picture a situation with total fragmentation, foreign domination, and an absolute vacuum of leadership. For the everyday person, this feels like unending anxiety. No one knows who's actually in charge, legacy institutions are failing, and the future looks incredibly bleak. Sounds like a total disaster, doesn't it? But it's precisely this systemic weakness that makes history highly actionable. It creates this incredibly rare window where coordinated action from a capable actor can completely reshape the political equilibrium. The old guards are literally just too weak to stop you. Now, in these moments, we're constantly caught between two opposing feedback loops that dictate how a crisis actually plays out. On one side, we have the fragmentation loop. This is your classic destructive cycle. Internal division leads to external domination, which causes even more fragmentation, and suddenly your capacity to resist just crumbles. It's a total death spiral. Local elites often choose this path because they're terrified of losing their own tiny slices of power, so they actually sabotage each other while the whole ship sinks. But on the flip side, we see the unification loop. This is the idealized reset. A strong leader emerges to coordinate a narrative, which increases coordination, builds resistance capability, and eventually allows for a total systemic reset. And that brings us to this key takeaway. Collapse environments are high-leverage transformation windows. The fundamental rule of the playbook here is that fragmentation is either the precondition for a total system collapse or it is the raw material for system-level reconstruction. The mess itself is actually the material you use to rebuild. Think of post-World War II Europe or a massive corporate restructuring after a catastrophic bankruptcy. The leaders who succeed in these moments don't try to sweep away the debris. They use the extreme urgency of the absolute ruin to push through radical, unifying changes that would have been completely impossible during stable times. Section 2. The coordination power advantage. So, how does power actually operate when everything falls apart? Well, when a system fragments, three primary actors emerge, and they have entirely conflicting incentives. First up, you have foreign powers. Their core incentive is simply to exploit fragmentation. They maintain dominance by making sure the local system stays completely disunified. Then you have the fragmented states themselves. Astoundingly, local elites will stubbornly compete internally, prioritizing their own tiny local advantages over the survival of the entire system. It's crazy, but they're so paralyzed by their own rivalries and egos that they resist central coordination to their own absolute detriment. And finally, you have the unifier, whose incentive is to consolidate all those fragmented pieces to gain a maximal payoff, bringing order to the chaos. So the crucial point here is this hidden structural rule. The greatest power asymmetry is not strength, it is coordination versus fragmentation. Even a significantly weaker external power is going to absolutely dominate a system if the internal actors are disunified. Think of it like a massive, sprawling, uncoordinated barbarian army facing a tiny, highly disciplined Roman phalanx. Raw strength and sheer numbers mean absolutely nothing if they aren't coordinated. The organized minority will always defeat the disorganized majority. Section 3. Psychology of the unifier. But that raises a massive question, doesn't it? Why do groups with shared interests consistently fail to act together? Let's look at the mobilization psychology that makes or breaks a system.
It all starts with the coordination failure bias, meaning groups with a shared interest in surviving still fail to act collectively. Why? Well, because of identity fragmentation. People's loyalty to their local faction or identity completely overrides their instinct for systemic survival. They would honestly rather rule the ashes of their own tiny province than cooperate to save the whole shebang. And this creates a desperate psychological void, which leads right to charismatic appeal. When severe shocks hit, human beings desperately crave a savior. They'll eagerly rally behind a unifying leader who seemingly possesses the confidence and vision to reverse that systemic decline. There is a core truth to all systemic resets, and it's this: populations do not act on structural logic. They act when a unifying narrative compresses fragmented incentives into a single direction. You can't just hand out a logical spreadsheet or a pragmatic policy brief and expect to mobilize a fractured society. No way. You need a central narrative. Compressing incentives basically means finding that one overwhelming emotional truth that makes bitter rivals realize, hey, we're actually on the same side. That narrative is the exact control node you need to bridge conflicting local interests and mobilize a society into a unified force.
Section 4. The Cross-Domain Strategy.
And this brilliantly illustrates a massive shift in perspective, because this 16th century logic applies perfectly to highly complex modern systems today. Take cybersecurity. Disconnected, fragmented defense systems fail instantly under a coordinated attack. You might have the best individual firewalls in the world, but if they don't talk to each other, you lose. The solution is unified incident response that converts crisis back to control. Or look at trading systems. Fragmented market signals are constantly exploited by coordinated actors. You need unified strategic direction to capture macro shifts before others do. In chess, scattered, unsupported pieces are easily picked off by a coordinated attack, but unifying those pieces creates dynamic counterplay. And in military strategy, fragmented states collapse under unified invasion unless centralized command builds actual resistance capacity. The dynamic is exactly the same everywhere. So let's break down the precise Machiavellian counter-strategy checklist for exploiting these compression points before an external power stabilizes the system. These steps literally have to happen in order. Step 1. You must unify those fragmented internal incentives, because without internal alignment, any action will just tear you apart from the inside. Once aligned, Step 2. Create a strong central leadership narrative to permanently bind them together. With a unified front, Step 3. Build native capacity to actually resist external forces. And finally, Step 4. Exploit foreign overreach as a mobilization catalyst. Honestly, this is pure genius. When an external power gets greedy and pushes too hard, don't just fight them. Use their aggression. Use the external pressure and the shared suffering to forge a rock-solid, coordinated identity among your own people. Section 5. The Modern Strategic Reality. Now, it all sounds flawlessly logical, doesn't it? But we need to pull the rug out slightly here and critique Machiavelli's blind spots for today's complex world. First, the text assumes a flawless redeemer prince can realistically emerge to fix everything, which, let's be honest, is highly improbable. Second, it vastly underestimates the vicious cutthroat resistance you're going to face from entrenched local elites who just want to keep their power at all costs. Third, it kind of romanticizes unification as the stable, permanent end state. But most importantly, replacing fragmentation with total centralization just concentrates your risk in one place. In the modern era, centralization creates entirely new layers of fragility. If your entire system relies on one central server or one all-powerful CEO, a single targeted stripe brings the whole thing crashing down. Which reveals the ultimate evolution of the playbook: coordinated decentralization with aligned incentives. Sustainable systems today just cannot rely on a single central dictator. Unification isn't automatically stabilizing. To survive today, systems must balance tight coordination with distributed, decentralized resilience. Think about decentralized tech protocols or modern, flat corporate structures. They have a unified, aligned mission and shared protocols, but the actual execution and power are distributed across the network. That way, if one node fails, the overarching system completely survives. So that leaves us with one final, critical question. How long will fragmentation persist before an external power locks in structural dominance? This right here is the ticking clock in any collapsing system. If you wait too long to coordinate, that opportunity window closes permanently. So ask yourself, in the systems you rely on, who is going to unify the fragmented pieces before an external force takes over? Thank you for joining me for this explainer. Think on these structures, and we'll catch you in the next one.